Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Basscast Radio. I'm your host, Brian Carter, and joining me tonight, Thomas Aarons with Fishing the DMV. And we got
Hello.
a special guest this week. We got a local angler, something we don't get too often on Basscast Radio because a lot of you guys don't want to come on and tell all your honey holes, your secrets, and lies and stories to tell. But we got Mr. Brandon Pritchett on with us. And Brandon, definitely appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the invite.
So, guys, tonight we're going to talk about Bugs Island, all things Bugs Island. But before we dive into that, I really want to thank everyone that came out and fished with the basscast.com this past weekend. It was a low turnout. It was the time of the year, but, it still was some nice bags weighed in. And two local hammers, Mark Wynn and Mike Nichols ended up winning it. This has been Mike Nichols' year. I mean, he's won a lot of stuff on Smith Mountain Lake, but I ain't gonna lie, guys. If I had that much time and fished the lake a lot, I hope I know where some fish are as well. But they I mean, putting in the hours, something we talk about here a lot on Basscast Radio. But thank you to them, and we traveled down to Bugs Island and covered the think they might have one more of the bug. Yeah, it's one more because before the championship is the Bugs Island Bass Kings, and I know their next tournament is the same weekend, which is in 2 weeks, of the Big Bass Tour coming back to Smith Mountain Lake for the fall edition. So if you guys haven't heard, hopefully you all know, because I know they send out text messages to everybody, the Big Bass Tour is returning to Smith Mountain Lake. And if all goes well, the basscast.com will be up there for all 3 days of that. So, guys, make sure you guys check it out. Also, the fall side, I guess you say, of the Cat Smith Mountain Lake Tournament Series should be starting up really soon. So make sure you guys add those dates to the calendar as well. We only have 2 more Basscast events left, and then it is our championship in December. So, again, thank you to everyone that's fished with us so far this year. Hey, what's up with you, Thomas?
Man, I'm just absolutely being a masochist. I am dropping, I think it's 5 episodes this week, 5 episodes next week, finishing out October on a high, and then I'm actually going to dial back to a manageable 3 episodes right now. It's so much fishing always happens in clumps, which is, if you track it from my end, it's crazy how you'll go to Kerr for like 3 weeks. Everyone goes to Kerr, so we cover Kerr. Then they go to the Potomac, and you got all these clusters. And now that everyone's in their regionals and championships, we'll be winding down here for the year.
If you guys are watching, we don't have Geek with us tonight. Geek is on the water. He is hitting record. He's waiting for the moon to come up and the big old bass to...
He's doing a secret episode. It's the October midnight pattern. A lot of people miss out on it, so it'll be interesting to see that video drop.
Yes. So Geek is hitting record right now. So yeah, like I said, make sure you guys tune in for him. Don't forget, you can check us out on all your podcast networks as well as our YouTube channel. And thank you guys. The YouTube channel has been blowing up. Basscast Radio has been blowing up as well. If you guys haven't checked out Before the First Cast with Thomas, gosh, I'm like rolling tonight. Calvin Herndon. What does it take to fish on a pro level with Sean Keane? I think Sean Keane has something to do with I guess he is sponsored by English Choice Marine. So you guys make sure you check out that show. It already be dropped because we're dropping these on Monday now, but please check it out. Both shows are doing extremely well, and we really, really appreciate you guys listening. All right, like I said, Brandon Pritchett tonight. Welcome to the show. Let's start off with this simple little question here. Introduce yourself. How'd you get the little fishing bug? And then we'll dive into. I got 3 questions, and that's about it. And we're going to play on them.
All right. So I'm Brandon Pritchett. I started fishing roughly, like I said, about 4 or 5 years old for fun, with my father. He would take me fishing when I was a kid at Bugs Island. Learned how to bass fish, crappie fish, catfish, the normal little kid stuff, and had a good time. When I was a young teenager, I got the tournament bug because my father took me out and we fished a Appomattox Bass Masters tournament. And this was in July. Went out of Occoneechee, and we had found some fish down around the dam. And I mean, they were on some brush piles down there, big time, that we had put in. And we ran down there. My first cast, I caught a 7-pounder. Now you got to realize this is back when in the heyday of Bugs Island. I commenced to catch fish after fish after fish, and it was a 10-fish limit. We weighed in 10 bass that weighed 47 pounds.
Good
And that
God.
was my very first tournament. We cleared second place by over, I think, 11 pounds, and we won the tournament. That was the very first tournament I fished.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was, and we won big fish too. It was incredible. And then from that moment on, I mean, I wanted to tournament fish, and I people that know me know I fished with David Dudley when he was coming along. Me and him were really good friends and still are to this day. Um, we team tournament fished together. We were the two young kids out there kicking the older guys' butts, and they didn't like it, just like the news today, you know. And but we lived it, we slept it, we breathed it. I mean, that was our thing. Was tournament fishing. And we you hear the saying, iron sharpens iron. That's how we were with each other.
Awesome.
And David graduated a year ahead of me, so he was able to go start his career. I believe that was in 95 was his first year, I think. And then the following year, when I graduated, I started fishing the Bassmaster Invitationals. We traveled together, did well at it. I wound up, I think, to my second year, I missed making the top 100 by 1 point.
Oh, wow.
And it really burned me out because of missing it by that close. And I kind of got out of it a little bit for a little while, and then later down the road, got that bug back again, and I started back, and then
Awesome.
and ever since I've kind of been up and down on it a little bit. As far as I did have a period of about 10 years that I really didn't fish any tournaments after I had my kids, and which is understandable. You got ball games, and school functions, and all the other stuff. But one thing I've done that I'm probably most proud of with my children is I have 3 boys. Okay, they're 21, 18, and 12. I have won a tournament with each one of my sons.
That's pretty cool. That's really awesome.
And a couple of them pretty good size. I mean, I know y'all remember like the Conrad Brothers Trail at Smith Mountain.
Yeah.
My oldest and I won one of those in August one year. Daytime tournament, not night, day.
Wow.
And I mean, I was like 60, 70 boats in that tournament. It was pretty good size. And then my son Matthew and I won tournament at Bugs Island. I hadn't been to Bugs Island literally. I mean, this is during one of those periods of when I wasn't fishing. I hadn't been there in forever. We show up, and it's a tournament out of Grassy. It had about 40 boats in it. And it was like Adam and Eve, or a father son, father daughter, something like that.
Yeah, the region 2 used to have them all the time.
Yeah, and that might have been exactly what it was.
Probably was.
But I mean, I had no idea, Brian. Hadn't been on the lake in forever, and Matthew and I, we started shallow, caught 5 pretty quick, and then went out deep. And I caught everything. This is old school too. I caught most of them on Carolina rig. Had 17 pounds in July.
Wow.
Smoked them. Yep. And
that's pretty good, because that don't happen too often anymore.
No, it doesn't. It was a good day. It was a very good day. But that those memories will never go away. I mean, that's what it's all about, is teaching the next
Oh yeah.
generation too. And
Well, are you let's dive into Bugs Island.
yep.
Let's dive into this place here. For you guys who are listening to live last night before last, because I couldn't listen yesterday, Thomas, you had a little too early for me. But Thomas brought up something about Bugs Island, and it was talking about how tough it is now. And we know, Bugs Island had the virus about, good gosh, that's probably been 10 years ago now,
Longer.
but or
Yeah.
longer. But
Mhm.
it's one of those lakes that if you bring in 20 pounds on day one, it's unforgiving on day two. I mean, you better bring your A game to Bugs Island for both days. And Thomas will tell you that because, I mean, like I said, he brought it up on Monday Night Live.
Yeah, it just was very interesting when you look statistically back at the BFLs. When Jake dropped a 21-pound bag, it really is reminiscent of Florida, where somebody might just crack a mega bag, and then it's about just surviving the next 2 or 3 days, and you will always generally see it tick down comparatively. And it's the same thing in the stats where 11 pounds average, a lot of people would laugh you out of the town, but at Kerr, you're getting paid if you can average 11 pounds. And it's such interesting disparity there. And is that just because the people that key on largemouth versus spotted bass?
Um, I think so. You kind of hit on a couple things. I think you started with Jake, dropping the 21 pounds, and he followed that up, if I remember correctly, with about 6,
Yeah,
right?
6 and then
Mm-hmm.
11
So,
day 3.
yeah, and the 11 was completely different. I do know that. I talked to him afterwards. Um, but it's no hidden secret. I mean, he caught that 21 pounds up the river. And what happens at Bugs Island when the water rises like it did? I mean, it came up like 6 feet in just a very few days, right? And that really messed me up because I was keying more on offshore fish.
Right.
But it did start to clear up there enough in certain tributaries that feed into, your rivers up there. And he was able to go up and land on them pretty much in about 100-yard stretch. And he caught a 7-pounder, which, is very rare at Bugs Island.
That's a unicorn.
I mean,
Yeah,
that
that's
goes,
definitely a unicorn.
yeah, it goes a long ways. Um, but you see that kind of stuff from time to time. You'll see people drop those 20-pound bags out of that river. Now, out of the lake, the last 20-pound bag I saw out of that lake was in March of 2020.
That's
As
about
far
right.
as myself,
And just for clarification, when you mean the river, do you mean like up in the Roanoke River, or like
that
do you mean
that
up lake or up river?
upriver, like
Okay.
like once you get above the bridges in Clarksville, you split off. You have it's the Roanoke, but it's called the Stanton River at that point. That's to your right hand side, and then you have the Dan River on your left hand side, and you can actually go up those rivers to where they turn into, moving water rivers. And then there's other little rivers and creeks that feed into those rivers that are very good. The problem when the water rises, and this is what I've found with my experience there, when the water's high, it creates too much area for those fish to
Mm-hmm.
roam, and it makes it tough to catch them. You want to go up those rivers for it to be more consistent when it's low. But the problem you run into there, it's so shallow you can't get to some of those places when the water's at normal level or a little down like it was before it came up. Um, so I mean, everything aligned for him. It was his day, no doubt, on that first day. Because when the water's 5 to 6 foot over full pond, and you're still able to catch a 20-pound bag up there, I mean, everything has totally went your way because it just doesn't happen. But it definitely carried him all 3 days. That 21 pounds dead. You know, I fish mostly like mid-lake down, say from like Abbey Hill down to the Alpha Nutbush. And, you know, I had 13 something that first day, and I caught 40 keepers, you know. So, I mean, the fishing was really good. I did have, you know, one pretty good one come off in a brush pile, but the fishing was really good that first day. The next couple of days, it started getting tough because it started feeling all that pressure of, you know, almost 200 boats or whatever it was, you know,
Well,
out there.
I don't mean to cut you off, but let's talk about that pressure really quick and what you're talking about. And I've seen it. You know, I've been doing this thing for 15 years, guys, and I've seen it. You know, in just the tournaments that I have covered, you know, it's always. I mean, and for you guys that don't know, let me back up real quick. For you guys that don't know, Bugs Island started in the 50s. It's 50,000 acres. It has over 800 miles of shoreline. It's in North Carolina and Virginia. So we're not talking about no small lake here.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen, even like I said, in, you know, Bass Nation events and other tournaments that I have covered, you notice a 2 to 4 pound drop off in weights between day one and day two. It doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't matter the size of the tournament. So why do you think that drop off is? And like I said, we're talking 50,000 acres.
Yeah, that drop off is from you know, it is 50,000 acres, Brian, but like any lake, it is there's only certain areas that the majority of the fish live in. And those areas can be affected tremendously with 3 to 4 days of practice leading up to an event. You know, that's the thing right there, that a lot of these tournament trails, you know, that's one thing I like about English Choice. English Choice has off limits. You know, most of their events, you get 1 day of practice. And like the Virginia Elite 70s, the same way, you get 1 day of practice. That way, it preserves a lot of those so-called easy fish that you can just catch. I mean, if you're going down the bank throwing a spinnerbait, you know, the fish is going to bite it. It doesn't matter if I'm throwing it or you're throwing it, Brian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those are the easy fish that just get stuck, and then they're not available come day one, day two of a tournament, you know, because they've been caught. And, you know, when you get high water like we did in this event, it also shrinks it because it keeps you from being able to get, you know, back as far in creeks because of bridges you can't no longer go under, or, you know, it muddies up areas that are traditionally good, that now it's like you can plant corn in it because it's so muddy,
Fishing in
and
bushes.
it's no good anymore, you know.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Based on some of the biologists I talked to, my hypothesis is the problem with Kerr right now is the biomass of quality fish to the size. So if you put 10 really good deer on 1 acre lot for your hunting reservation, you would think there's great deer. Okay, this is the best place to hunt. But then you put a 10,000 acre reserve, but you still only have 10 deer. All of a sudden you're saying there's not enough. And I think that's kind of why you're seeing it with the weights, because if you can compare and contrast this with, let's say, a Smith, which you've had an F1 stocking program that's been very successful there, I think for per acre, there's a better chance of you running into a good one. And that's why, generally speaking, I think the weights are better there. And so are there great fish in Kerr? Absolutely there are, clearly, because people will crack a good one. Is there as many per acre as some other lakes?
No,
I don't think so.
no, they're not. And the problem with that, and I've talked to Dan Wilson, who is over the Great Lake of Smith Mountain you're talking about, and he agrees with me. The problem with Kerr is the catfish.
Oh yeah.
That's the problem. Those catfish are eating the bass.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of their favorite foods. And I was also talking to him and another biologist that down there. They say those things eat their weight in like 24 hours.
Wow.
Now
And
you've seen some of the catfish that come out of that lake. I mean, that's where the world record come
Mhm.
out of. And I've seen them down there on my live scope. I mean, they're 5 foot long, and I mean those fish are just devouring bass as fast as they're born. I mean I couldn't tell you how many 3 pounders I've caught that have jaw marks where they got away from one.
Oh wow.
You know, I mean it's the catfish keep the bass moving. Everybody used to love to blame the blue black heron. That ever since live scope, that's one thing I love about live scope is
Oh
all
yeah.
the theories that everybody had. Now you can see them, and you know what's what.
It's
The
made the lake better. I think it's actually kicked the weights up at Kerr, honestly.
Yeah, but not just that, but like trying to understand
Oh
why
yeah.
on a lot of the things that we always used to have reasons for and thought, myth thought, something was this way because of this. But I couldn't tell you over the years how many people, said this lake's ruined. It's got those blueback heron in it. No,
Hmm.
no, that makes lakes better. Blueback heron are a great source of food for bass. Um, but it used to be Bugs Island was like a ledge lake. You could go there and you could fish a row of stumps on a break, and 8 out of 10 times you pull up and you can get bit off of that stump. That fish doesn't set on a stump anymore. That fish is running for its life or chasing food.
And when you talk
And
about the habitat, if I may interject, I
mhm,
think the elephant in the room is to also it fluctuates water wise so much that
yes,
you have two issues there. One is the
Yeah.
spawning habits of the fish. It is very
mhm,
much the spawning class of that year is really dependent on the Army Corps of Engineers. I mean, sadly, like depending on how they want to lift and lower that water. And again, it's also shoreline habitat. I fished high school tournaments there, and they would reminisce about fishing the bushes. And I would love a statistical thing of how many times those damn bushes have been in the water the past 10 years, because I feel like they're trying to keep the lake lower and lower each year almost. And
mhm.
how much is that going to impact the largemouth? I think the spots are okay. And I think in 5 to 10 years, spots will probably be predominant, but it's at the cost of our largemouth fishery.
Yeah. And I think the spots, talking about them so far, I think they've actually been a good thing
Yeah, sadly.
because they give you more bites, and they are getting big. I mean, I've caught a 5 pounder out of there already.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, in June this year, on my birthday, I went out for a few hours and I caught 19 pounds of spotted bass. That's five.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're in there. Um, there's not as many of those big ones yet. They're very area specific, you know, but I have seen, a wider range of them showing up in different areas where I hadn't before. And I have caught, like a bunch of 2 pounders in areas where I was only seeing those dinks a couple years ago, you know.
Brandon, you've have such a history on this. Like, when do you think anecdotally you started to really notice the spotted bass or the Alabama bass showing up in the lake?
I think I caught the first one like 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
Um, and I mean, I know where they come from. I'm not going to drop any names, but they come from right below. They got brought there from below.
Don't worry, the names have been dropped on the
Oh
bass.
yeah, I'm not
Pretty
going
Literally
daggone hard, I'll tell you
on
that.
my
That
live
was
stream
really hard.
a
Yeah,
day ago. But
but
so 10
yeah.
years ish.
Well, I would say for sure they've been in there that long, but they
Yeah.
really started showing up, pretty regular in the last 5 years. About every fishing trip you make, you're catching some, you know.
And, And so if you guys don't know, I've had on the head of the task force for an Auburn University for Alabama bass spots. I've had on the head of the task force for Virginia with this. So we've really dated this, and Philpott and Gaston were the ground zeros for this stuff. And I think that's interesting if those are the ground zeros, and Gaston is starting to turn out better spotted bass weights. So positively, if you want to look at it as a positive, I still think Kerr is young with the Alabama spotted bass. I think in, like you said, 5 years, I think those weights should start kicking back up, but it will take time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this weekend when I was down there for the Bass Kings Cat event, the guys were all talking about seeing some 5 and 6 pound spotted bass already. So I mean, they are getting bigger. Now I don't know a whole lot about myself, but do they grow a little bit slower, or they're just a bass that takes quite a while to get to that 5 to 6 pound mark? I mean,
Well, any fish takes time. So like a river smallmouth in Virginia, it can take almost 10 to 15 years to get to citation size, just to give you an idea. A F1 is just basically, it's a souped up Ferrari. It was genetically bred to get big really quickly. A spotted bass, it's going to be like your typical northern largemouth, where it'll take 5 to 10 years to get to class size, plus the abundance of them.
right.
That's why there's a lot of lakes down south where you can have 10,000 1-pounders and they all have to compete. So based on the data, we should have a peak here in the next 5 to 6 years where you will have mega bags of spots before there's just so many of them that it kind of will level down the numbers.
Brandon, you were talking earlier about the catfish in that lake, and for you guys that don't know, Bugs Island has 1 or 2 catfish tournaments each and every year, and it's 2, yeah, and they're big tournaments. I mean, because we've seen some very big catfish come out of that lake, and I've seen the photos of bobcats. But do you think the spotted bass that are in there now with the catfish will they just weed out a lot of them and maybe help keep it from getting overpopulated, like Thomas was talking about?
I think they will maybe help some with the spotted bass population. The catfish. Now I'm just going to go off again what talking to Dan Wilson and some of the other guys about. I don't know if we'll see any more 150-pound catfish, because he said like that first wave of them are your big ones.
Okay.
And then after that, they kind of get smaller. But I know it's abundantly full of those catfish as well. I mean, I've pulled up on places over the years, and I mean, you can catch catfish every cast like you do bass. I mean, it's incredible.
On the Potomac River, which is the closest river to me, I mean, you pan your forward-facing sonar of your choice out there, and it looks like a hornet's nest. They can get in so thick. Mm-hmm. On Kerr, if you catch a catfish, let's say you pull up to one of your cane piles, you catch a catfish, do you keep fishing there because the bass intermingle, or all of a sudden you're like, I'm out because the catfish are here? That means the bass aren't.
I'll get away. If you catch a catfish off of one of those places, the bass are not going to hang. They're running from those things.
That happens to me too on the river. That's so weird.
Yeah, and I've watched them on live scope. I'm talking about the catfish. I have watched them cut through a brush pile and actually eat bass, and bass separate like shad.
Mm.
I mean, it's insane. And they do the same thing to crappie as well. Like when you're crappie fishing, you watch catfish come in and the crappie just start disappearing.
And that's honestly, with the whole governmental debate about this, where I think blue cats are way more of a threat than the snakehead, because it doesn't seem like the snakehead take over. And I can go down a spatter dock field, I can catch a 4 or 5 pound largemouth, then catch a snakehead, then a largemouth. It seems like they coexist a lot better, but I've never caught a bunch of catfish and then randomly then got on a good group of bass.
Yeah, I'm the same. I see the exact same thing you're talking about. because this snakehead deal with the Potomac. I mean, we give you a good example, Belmont Bay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, over there fishing a tournament, one of these PFLs for the Shenandoah in May, I believe it was. And I'm on a grass bed in there, and my partner catches like a 10-pound snakehead. And I mean, I literally set the hook on a bass before he puts that in the boat.
Yeah.
I mean, they're right there together. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how different species will coexist and mingle, crappie, largemouth. But then there's other species that, they just don't want any part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about the spotted bass, and we all know that the Alabama bass, the mix of the tiger bass, are going to be put into Lake Gaston here really soon. That's the plan. I know they're trying to put them into Bugs Island as well, but that's not in the plan. I think is it Lake Gaston next year?
I thought it was as soon as this year.
Yeah, it might have been this year. So
Yeah.
they're trying to start maybe weeding some of them out because those tiger bass do eat a whole lot of fish.
And honestly, I think it's so weird because I think it's a smart decision to do F1s at Gaston first because of the size. Like it's always bang for your buck. If you guys don't know, have a great relationship with the Maryland department. I'm on the board for Maryland, but for Virginia too. And they're like, like a Lake Anna size is easier to fix than Lake Erie because it's just the volume. And it cost, I think Lake Anna 1 year is over $100,000 to stock that place, let alone a Smith or a Kerr that's 3 times the size of Smith. Like,
yeah,
I just wish, this is my pet peeve. Could we get a nice boat ramp at Gaston so we have that as an option for BFLs? Because it's a fun fishery. It really is. And it gets overlooked so much.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah, because we only have 2 boat ramps and they both kind of suck.
Holly Grove. Holly Grove can't handle it. And, if they would open back up the Americamps to tournaments, that's where we used to go out of.
Old Americamps.
Yeah. But Virginia needs a boat ramp at Lake Gaston, 100%.
I was down there for a tournament for English Choice one year, and it started snowing, and it snowed like a mofo, and I was like, and I stayed in the little bird houses they have up there. You guys remember the little bird houses you could camp at? And it had a little heater and 2 bunk beds, and that was it. And I was like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going home.
Good Lord, that does not sound fun. I remember when Gaston had grass in it, going back to my high school years. Like that was a long time ago. That place has changed a lot. It really has.
Still a great fishery.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed Gaston as well. That's a great fishery. But back on Bugs, Bugs needs the F1s, and a little breaking news here. I mean, me and Marty Stone have been discussing with some of the game and inland fishery guys about doing this and helping them raise money to fund it for Bugs Island. And we're still waiting on them to decide because they have these big meetings every year where they decide on what's going to be their next lake, and we're waiting to hear back from those guys. And we're going to, try to start raising money to fund that program.
That would be a major step in the right direction if they could do some kind of like 5-year stocking program there. I don't know if either of you have heard, and I'd love to get information about this. Is there anything about habitat restoration to where they can start either implanting better brush piles or helping with the water willow? Is there anything like that to help with largemouth habitat?
Well, I know, I believe pretty sure it's the Bass Federation that works on some of that water willow stuff that you're talking about. They do donate time, and I think they raise some money to do that down there. As far as brush piles, man, my dad keeps that place full of them. I mean, he's legit the only person that has an Army Corps of Engineer permit to legally put in brush at Bugs Island.
That's cool.
trust me, we dump plenty. I mean, it's a whole lot of structure in that lake.
So if you could have one wish granted to just fix something habitat-wise at Kerr and snap your fingers and have it happen, what would it be?
Well, at this point, my one wish would be that you could have your state's government fund a program to put a bounty on catfish. And if you could kill out those catfish, I believe Bugs Island would come back to the heydays. I really do believe that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Mine would be letting hydrilla grow, and not put such a bounty on killing every blade of grass. But I like that one too.
Yeah. The catfish are really hurting it. And I'll say it here. I don't care. I mean, I told Dan Wilson about it. I run a test with noodles, and I was trying different fish on noodles to see which ones they liked the best. And I put a bass on one, and it went down. I mean, like right away. I said, no way. I put another bass on one right away. Went down. Both of them had giant catfish on them. I mean, that is what they're eating. They're like the little filet mignons to those catfish. So that's what they're eating. I mean, I never see catfish cutting through shad. For example, I mean they're eating game fish. That's what they're eating.
Let's fast forward just a little bit to the largemouth bass virus. For you guys that don't know what it is, guys, it causes a die-off in largemouth bass populations, particularly during periods of stress such as high water temperatures or poor water quality. And to get back what Thomas was talking about, the grass kind of helps water quality. So I mean, it kind of filters. I mean, it's a earth-made filter that we have killed in all of our lakes.
Yeah. I'll die on this hill. I've fought so many. I'm fighting Gunnersville, nonprofit organization right now, which is always a smart move. And I was talking to some river keepers in the Upper Bay about this because it's a natural filtration system. It is. And if you have a hydrilla or lily pad, something like that, it does filtrate, but it gives habitat. Lakes, as they get older, they lose a lot of that hard cover, and SAV of some type, it gives it not only a forage base with bluegill and minnows, it also gives spawning habitat for largemouth. And it's statistically, scientifically proven lakes that have grass in it have less spotted bass to largemouth. That's why Gunnersville, in the heart of spotted bass territory, has more largemouth, is because of the grass. And so a Kerr, if they're going to constantly fluctuate the water, which does hurt bass populations, letting some hydrilla or some milfoil grow in there, I believe would help balance out the blue cat population for sure.
What did when that thing hit? What did you guys think? We all knew that it would make its run, but the turnaround that we actually end up getting after it was over, it's kind of like not what we really wanted. I mean, it really did mess up the whole entire ecosystem of Bugs Island.
You talk about the bass virus?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a rough time for that lake for sure. I mean, boy, we weighed in some long, skinny, sickly looking fish back during that period. My dad was also heavily involved in that. He was working with the Game Commission and a couple other, people that were affiliated with that. And I know y'all all saw that video and stuff about it that was out years ago. So they would go collect fish and stuff that had died at tournaments and whatever and test them. But I tell you one thing that never gets talked about that was found out to be very true of why that lake hasn't really come back. Because they studied everything, water quality and all the things we're talking about. But one thing you can't change, Bugs Island when it was healthy, like I'll go back to like late 80s, 90s, that era that everybody remembers, the heyday of when, it took 10 bass that weighed 40 pounds to win every early bird tournament there ever was. If you didn't have over 40, you might as well not even weigh them. Back then, people used to farm, and there were a lot of tobacco farms and other kind of farms all up along those rivers that feed into that lake. And what do we put on stuff when we're trying to grow? We put fertilizer.
Yep.
We put stuff like that down. Well, when it rains, that runoff goes into that water, and that fertilizes your lakes, which helps with nutrients and stuff like that, and that keeps a good, healthy small fish population. Also helps keep a healthy, water running completely through that lake. And I mean that the color of Bugs Island is like completely different of what it was in the 90s. It used to have the prettiest green tint to it. And it was from all that nutrients that were in that water from those farms. And that's one thing that was brought up, in those meetings my father had, but it was never really publicized and talked about. But that's something that would be hard to change at this point, because farming's just not what it once was. You know, Tobacco farming is definitely not what it once was. I mean, it used to be, you'd see signs promoting tobacco. Now you see them promoting to quit tobacco.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that used to be Tobacco Central down there. But those kind of things too have definitely changed that lake, and you don't have the nutrients in it that you once did, and it was getting a healthy dose of that year after year after year. So that's one thing that's also hurt that lake.
We also got to keep in mind too, it's an old lake. If you guys want to go check out the episode I did, I had all the Army Corps of Engineers on to talk about the history of the lake. I mean, it started getting built during World War II when we were storming the beaches of Normandy. And when it filled up, I think it's 77 years old. In our lifetime, it would be 100 years old. That's an old lake compared to the baby of the family, which is Smith, which was almost built in our lifetime. And I guess that kind of boggles my mind. You think like how long that lake has been there and everything's been sitting in that lake. And the older lakes get, they have these periods when a new lake is constructed. Most new lakes that are constructed, that's when they're going to have that 10-year period where you're going to have world records, state records pump out of it. And I think this is interesting for the biologist. How do you treat these older lakes? Because a lot of them, they don't have experience with 100-year-old lake. What do you do to keep them in good quality?
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely going to be a learning curve for sure, because they don't have the experience to deal with that, just like you're talking about. Thing I might want to worry more about is the dams. Make sure you take good care of those, as they get older. Because I know concrete, I think first 100 years gets harder, and then after that it starts going the other way. So that's something else they better be thinking about for sure.
That's very, very true. Brandon, let's we'll move a little bit further on. You guys know in the last few years, we've had a Bassmaster Open on Bugs Island. The college kids are coming to Bugs Island next year. Brandon just wrapped up. They call it a super tournament, don't they?
That was a regional
to go
Yeah.
fish.
I made the All-American, dude.
The
Come on.
All-American, and
Nice.
actually he did it by an ounce, so he will be in the All-American in 2025. But what do you think has caused this resurgence of these larger events wanting to come back to Bugs Island? I mean, is it because guys, really, it's a hole in the ground. I mean, it's no bigger than Appomattox, Virginia, with a lake. I mean, it's actually smaller than that with a lake.
Yeah, Clarksville's a nice town, though.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, money.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the reason. All those tournament trails are businesses. They could care less if you're catching pound and a halfers or 10 pounders. If they can get a city to pay for their event and it's big enough to host their event, and they've got hotels to stay in. That's the thing about Smith Mountain. Smith Mountain's a great lake. It has nowhere to stay.
No.
That's something else that needs to be done. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, Bassmaster and MLF and all of them would be coming to Smith a lot if you had places to stay. You know,
And this is my issue with the system in general. And maybe I'm just a virtuous individual that doesn't live in reality, but you need to reward, I think, the better fisheries. Like, why do you make a top 50 list in a magazine and then you're like, by the way, half the top lakes we're just never going to go to? We're going to go to the Sabine for the 58th time because we love
Yeah.
to see 4-pound limits.
oh
And,
yeah,
and that's like the issue with I have always had with Kerr is it's not that I want Kerr to succeed, but also when you have a Smith or a Gaston pop off, reward the better fishery and have the tournaments go there. And how much of it is there's no infrastructure versus Smith Mountain just won't pay the money. Gaston won't pay the money. And I think a lot of that is the latter because we know the BPT, they somehow found the money for that.
Oh, you're talking about for the one coming up next year.
Yeah.
It's heavy hitters though. That's not many people.
Yeah, it won't be but like 25 boats, maybe 30 at the max.
I will say though that it's a huge, and again, I know this is a hot take for me. I am really glad that they are coming to put the lake on the map with how much money has been spent to make Smith Mountain Lake good. It's nice it'll get some national recognition.
Absolutely, I agree.
We're good. Yeah, to me, I don't know. Like in a perfect world, that's what I would be because I think if you did that, it would start making these communities throw more money into making the fisheries better. Because I guess if I run a county, what's the point in making a lake better when all I need to do is pay the organization to come here? And so it's weird. Do I put that money to make the lake better or be like, dude, I just pay them to come here and they'll fish out of a manhole cover. That's fine. And so I do think there's morally, ethically an issue there that needs to be changed up at some point. And again, we've had this conversation before. The one thing BBT got right, they went to some cool places like, Dale Hollow.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That was cool. Going to those North Carolina lakes, that was cool. More of that, please, from our professional fisheries.
That's one thing I like about MLF is they definitely have changed it up and they're able to do more untraditional type places. I really like that part about their organization.
Plus, also, guys, I mean, I didn't have much influence when the elites showed up here. I mean, we had just, be honest with you guys, Basscast had just started. I was young, dumb, and stupid. But they just didn't know how to really promote the actual event or didn't know enough about the event. And, we're hearing that now. A lot of people calling for, the elite series, the topper echelon to be dispersed because, they really don't. They're business people. They're business people that hired fishing people to run their business. And that's what it is. But, people are asking for that to be dispersed. But like I said, the area did not understand how to make the area better or, how promote the event or what went on during the event. And I think if I remember back then, it was like, $50,000 guaranteed to the winner. And the town actually puts up to $50,000. So the two chambers put up $25,000 each. And like you guys have said, there's nowhere to stay. There's one hotel, I guess you kind of call it a hotel on the lake. I know I hung out with a lot of different anglers at people's houses because you got to think this was 2008, 9.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as Airbnb back then.
And I'm curious because I think you should striate this into two different levels. It's us mere mortals and then the Jacob Wheeler PPT types who he's not getting a hotel. So
No.
I think it's interesting with the Airbnb culture now. Could a Smith Mountain Lake work for the elites or the BPT? Absolutely, I think, because those are the guys, they're going to go get a house, honestly. They're not going to get a Motel 8. I don't think, anyway. But then you're right. I do see your point there, validity-wise. If you're doing a BFL, how many people are going to do a hotel versus having 6 guys split an Airbnb? That would be a fun, nerdy little stat to know how many people actually still do the hotel thing versus splitting a house. That would be, I might do that. Yeah.
I think everybody stays at Airbnb because I
I
mean
think so too.
there that's the problem now is a lot of the hotels and stuff, and we're lucky at Bugs Island to be able to have hotels that know that's their market, but a lot of hotels don't have the hookups for boats. I mean, me and Jacob, my buddy here, traveled, and it was a no to hook up your boat. So I mean, because they're trying to nickel and dime you, but it's just the way it is. But now, like I said, with Airbnb, everybody can run their lines, hook up their boats, keep the batteries charged up. I've always said Smith Mountain Lake would be a great place for the Classic. I mean, we've got Liberty University right here that
That's a
would
good
love it.
idea.
I mean, it's huge. They just built like 2 triple decking parking lots,
Great
parking
idea.
lots. And, we've all seen the Classic. They don't mind traveling because I've been to many where it's a 45-minute ride from the lake to the arena. So, I mean, and it's not much further based on where you put in on Smith Mountain Lake. I mean, an hour ride to the arena.
And this is something Geeks talked about too, about just, showing the value of fishing, where if you were an Airbnb Lake Anna example, it's an Airbnb lake. It would be great for the economy there to where if you have a tournament in March, why wouldn't you, if you run like 83 houses and an Airbnb thing at Lake Anna, you could get all those houses filled for a 200 boat tournament. If you made a deal or a discount there, because people would buddy up. It's safer to leave your boat at a house versus a hotel. Like, I feel like there's a great opportunity there but it hasn't been exploited because I think from that side of things, they don't look at the economic impact of fishermen coming in, that has to change. You really have to, if you're a fisherman, you have to convince these towns and these lakes, they can make money in the off season. Basically, if you have a tournament in April and March when there's no pleasure boaters, you could have a nice little bump up in your income.
Brandon, we're going to wrap it up with this one right here, man. What do you think the future of Kerr Lake looks like? We're still kind of young.
I think if we can get this stocking program that we were discussing with the F1s, I think that would really help that lake tremendously. Probably not the same effect that Smith Mountain got, but it would definitely make it a 16, 17-pound bag type lake if you could do that. Because by the end, you got to figure it's going to be a bunch more of the bigger spotted bass in it.
Right.
The largemouth are going to always be there because it's just there's so much habitat for those largemouth. I mean, it really is. But I do think the F1s would help a ton. To put some of those good 4 to 5 pound bruisers in there that it needs, like Smith Mountain has.
Yeah.
But if they don't do that, I still say the future's bright because I think overall the spotted bass are positive. I heard so many people like, oh my God, spotted bass are in there. The lake's going to crap. It's not going to be. Well, go to Lake Hartwell.
Yeah.
I mean, Bugs Island and Lake Hartwell are basically the same lake. I mean, now that we have spotted bass, and they both have blueback heron, they both have gizzard shad, they both have threadfin. I mean, Hartwell's not a grass lake, Bugs Island's not a grass lake. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
they're very similar lakes. Hartwell puts them out. They have tournaments on that thing all the time, and it still takes 15, 16, 17, most like this time of year to do well and win.
And I think that's a great comparison because I think the difference is just the timing of it because, Hartwell has had the blueback established. So again, guys, Hartwell it's predominantly 100% a blueback bite. And so that's over 50 years potentially that they've had blueback in there. Kerr has definitely not had it that long. They haven't had the spots that long. So it's a timing deal. The other thing is like water clarity. Spots and blueback thrive in clear water. And Hartwell is predominantly clear. I think if you have a 5-year window of time and the water cleans up, blueback get in there even thicker, this thing is trending towards that type of lake. And if this thing's going to pop off, it'll be in the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to see those mega bags, because it's always, with any invasive, it's that first generation, so to speak, that goes through there that's going to put on that incredible weight.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping that it turns into like a Hartwell.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I foresee happening. Except for we'll have Hartwell North, I guess. Yep.
All right, guys. Brandon, man, really appreciate you coming on, talking with us tonight, talking about all things Bugs Island. Guys, if you've never been down to Bugs Island, book a trip today. Or, Brandon might take you out. I don't know. There's a bunch of guides on Bugs Island.
Hit me up. I might take you out. But before you run, I mean, for the people watching that just want to go somewhere and have fun and get bites and have a fun time, pretty much September, October, or that's not a good month to fish anywhere. I mean, honestly, if we're all honest about it, it's going to be tough no matter where you go. But in the springtime, when all these people want to get out, they've been in the house, all winter, and they want to get out and have a fun time catching fish. Go down to Bugs Island, in late March, early April, May. It's one of the best fisheries in the state. I'll put it against any as far as getting bites. I mean, it is fun. And typically in the spring, they have been holding it a little lower than normal, but you still have plenty of cover to fish along the banks, bushes, willow trees, lay down trees. I mean, just everything you can imagine. You flip drop shots, shaky heads, brush hogs, I mean, floating worms, wacky worms. You pick your poison and you're going to get bit. That's the nice thing about Bugs Island. And another key to Bugs Island, I'll put this out there. If you get bit, for example, I'm just going to give you an example situation. If you're starting into a main lake pocket and there's a willow bush going in about halfway back on the bank line, and you skip under that willow bush and you get a bite, well, guess what? The next 9 of them you find that are in the same situation, you're going to get a bite on them. It's a pattern lake. You can't go to Bugs Island and just put the trolling motor in and just fish everything. You can. There are times like that, but there's more times than not. You crack the code of where they're at, where they're located in pockets, or where they're located on the main lake. Are they on point bushes? Or are they in the very back ends? Are they halfway? Once you crack that code, you can run it all over that lake and you can get bit. So just remember that when you do go to Bugs Island to fish, it's a pattern lake. So no matter if you're offshore, if you're on the bank, mid depths, whatever, wherever you're finding your fish, keep that pattern going and you'll continue to do well. Don't get just stuck in fishing everything, because it just, you end up not catching as much as if you kept running the cover that you got bit on.
All right, there you guys go. Brandon dropped it for us tonight. Like I said, head on down to Bugs Island. Check out the lake. It's a great town on top of that. If you go the first of every month, they got a nice looking car show. They have lake day down there. There's always something going on at Bugs Island. So fireworks. So like I said, make a trip to Bugs Island, family. There's a lot of, if you love camping, I mean, it's plenty of places to camp, tent, whatever you want to do, put the kayaks in the water, you name it. So head to Bugs Island, check it out today. Man, I really appreciate all you guys being a part of tonight's show. Don't forget to hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube. We're growing a lot. Thank you to everyone who's been checking us out the last few weeks. And don't forget about Calvin Herndon's Before the First Cast, dropping every Friday morning on Basscast Radio. Guys, have a great week, everyone, and we will talk to you all next week right here on Basscast Radio.
Bye.
Yeah.